I had the near-death experience on Friday the 13th. I was released from physical form. I was one with everything that existed. I was in and through what we call God. I was within all things, knowing all things, the feeling of love beyond human understanding. Walking on water, freedom, meditation. I could feel everything, the birds, the trees, the flowers. I could feel it as if I was one with it. I was met by...
Hi, and welcome to The Returned. The truth always follows you back. Hi, and welcome to The Returned, a place where we share near-death stories, out-of-body experiences, spiritual awakenings, signs from spirit, and the journey of healers and light workers from around the world. Today, I have the honor to be sitting with Sherry Gideons, a woman whose life has bridged physical strength, spiritual inquiry, and two profound near-death experiences. Sherry doesn't speak about the afterlife as an idea. She's lived it. Sherry, welcome to The Returned.
Thank you. So grateful to be here. So grateful to get to share the wisdom that was shared with me.
Thank you very much. Before we step in to all the experiences that changed everything, I'd love to ground us in actually who you were before them. If you could give us maybe a brief idea of who you were prior, your life, your purpose, and if spirituality or religion had any role in your life before your turning point.
Absolutely. So if you heard my last name is Gideons, like the Gideons Bible, all those Bibles you used to see in the drawers of all the hotels and motels. Yeah, so my family were ministers, Baptist ministers. I went to Christian school. I literally came up during the 60s and 70s in a time when we experienced duality, or what I like to call fear. But I was a seeker very early in childhood. And so I would question, why would this loving God want to inflict upon us suffering and pain and struggle when it was supposed to be a loving God? And I was told, don't ask questions, do as you're told. And so there was always that inquiry in me, but I was raised by parents, one who the glass was half full, and the other where he was an overachiever, a perfect performer, and performance and success, you received love and affection based on that. And so that programming ran in my consciousness. And so everything that I did leading up to right before the near-death experience was as a result of my deep desire to be seen, heard, and valued. And what ended up happening was I came up during the evolution of the pro bodybuilding world. All through the 80s and 90s, started out competing on the Army powerlifting team in Europe, and came back into the United States around about 87. And as a result of that, I happened to merge very quickly into the professional bodybuilding world, and I was in the fitness magazines. And during that time, the evolution of mass muscle was progressing very fast and quickly. So, as we all probably know, steroids became very prevalent during that time to reach that level of mass muscle and leanness, which we see in a lot of the fitness magazines and the fitness industry, period. As a result of that, the program that was running in my head was not good enough. Every time I would do a show or compete, I was always told something needed to be better, whether it was, another muscle, my legs needed to be more muscular, my back needed to be more muscular, or it was just you need more cuts, curves, your hair needs to be longer. It was always something that had to do with somebody else's opinion. And as a result of that, I ended up starving myself to 78 pounds. The struggle for me is I began to experience spiritual experiences before the near-death experience, what we would call mystical experiences, in which I was having spirits show up on one level who were pleading with me not to let happen to me what had happened to them. So I didn't know what was going
Mm.
on. And so I started to get scared and I started to ask the questions. On one level, I thought God was calling me to die. And on another level, I was begging to be saved. So as these experiences, which are very deep, began to happen more often, I also began to develop an act, and my spiritual gifts begin to be activated, like telepathy, clairvoyance. I mean, I had all these things that began to happen where people would come into my presence and I could read their minds. I could read their consciousness.
Wow.
I could tell where they were at in what we call today frequency. I could tell where they were at in their electromagnetic field.
Interesting. So interesting. And so when that started, Sherry, before we step in to anything further, that religion that you grew with, did you still carry that at that time then
I
when you were
did.
experiencing these things? Yeah. So
I
that
did
caused
because
a really big confusion.
well, there was so much confusion again because, I was led to fear things like that. And so up
Yeah.
until that point, I mean, my mother, as I said, was the glass is half full. And so
Mhm.
if I was to share those sorts of things with my mother would get all caught up in that's the work of the devil and, whole demonic things related to that. And so again, I was having this quiet internal experience going on where I was scared and begging on
Yeah.
one level, again, begging to die because the emotions that I was experiencing were surrender, letting go,
Yeah.
giving up, because I had taken myself to a point in my life where I felt that nobody loved me and that I wasn't being
Oh,
seen, heard, or valued.
wow. That couldn't have felt very well. Not at all. Um, I think when you say that, I think about what's happening in our world right now with the girls, young adults, what I see across social media. I know it's not the same, but it maybe if I said it evolved to my sister-in-law used to be a
Mhm.
fitness pro. And I seen what that did to her. And I can empathize listening to you. And I think about all the young ladies that are out right now online being influencers or being influenced and watching and thinking if they have these types of feelings as you did as well, which I'm probably gathering there's a lot of women out there that feel like this now because back then it wasn't so widely broadcast. What do you think about that?
Well, it's absolutely true. I mean, as you begin to expand into a greater awareness within yourself, meaning, what really do you want out of life? When you understand how to express that emotion, what begins to happen is you're elevating that emotion in yourself, which we could call a vibration, which it becomes a frequency. And as a result of that, what happens is you're attracting people who are seeking within themselves. So I get to be the messenger of truth to those women who are opening up and sharing what they're going through. My journey taught me how to speak to people right where they're at and to really encourage them and elevate that awareness as to who they are, what they want, what brings them more joy, happiness, and greater expression. I just was in a movie for the Los Angeles Tribune, and the name of the movie that'll be coming out in 2026 is called The Rise of the Lioness. And it's really about female
Ooh,
leadership in the next evolution. And And that really the messaging is about what we're talking about right now. It's connected to what is the messaging we're sharing with the young women and just the young people of the next
Mm-hmm.
generation. Because if we think about it, what's happening with a lot of people is they keep repeating what we call the old patterns and loops, or we keep getting on that hamster wheel that keeps causing us to repeat the same experiences over and over in our lives. And so my messaging was really about you're amazing. You're wonderful. You're more powerful than you realize. You're more connected than you realize. And when we tap into that power within us in the present moment, we're giving out that signal. We can call it out into the universe, out into the quantum field, out into the law of God. But at the end of the day, the more that we come from within out, the more we begin to experience what it is we truly want instead of what we don't want.
Mm. That is like music to my ears. Honestly, you speak beautifully,
Thank
beautifully.
you.
So, with all that in mind, how would you feel about stepping us into the moment where everything changed for you when you crossed that threshold for the first time?
What began to happen, as I just said, I was 78 pounds. All my hair was falling out on the sides, the back of my head. I literally looked 100 years old, but I had body dysmorphia, so I couldn't see it. I thought I was a fat woman. I thought, there was something horribly wrong with me and that nobody loved me. And no matter how hard I tried, I wasn't creating the experiences that I wanted. And as a result, on one level, I began to beg to die. On the other level, I began to beg to be saved. And weeks before the near death experience, I had had some very deep experiences. I haven't mentioned yet that as I was in the pro bodybuilding and fitness industry, I was in the magazines, but I also during that time was living in Las Vegas. And I had attracted, and this is going to sound very deep, had attracted the Italian mafia. And so I'm living with the Italian mafia, and I said already that I was beginning to experience telepathy, the ability to read people's different levels of consciousness. And I knew what was going on in these men's head. Now, Super Bowl Sunday, 1996, I was sitting with a group of men from New York City in Las Vegas. And one of the particular men asked me to come up to his penthouse suite so he could speak to me. When I walked into the room, it's this big, massive room with a huge dining room table, but I began to see God glow in this man's eyes. And he looked at me and he said, "Have a seat." And I sat down and he looks at me and he says, "Sherry, it's all in your eyes how much you love and care about people." He said, "You're a star and you don't even know it." He says, "You're a scared little girl." He says, "Until you can hold your head high and say, I don't care what the world thinks, you'll never be ready for anything because you'll always be afraid of what the world thinks."
Hmm.
That next day, those people who I had been surrounded with no longer had anything to do with me. It was as if they no longer knew me or had never known me. I believe till this day that that man saw the
Hmm.
goodness in me and told them to let me go. 2 weeks later, I had the near-death experience on Friday the 13th, February 13th, 1997. And it was in that experience that I was released from physical form, and I was one with everything that existed. So I was in and through what we could call God as God. So I was within all things, knowing all things that existed not only in this realm, but in other realms all at once. It was completely the feeling of love beyond human understanding. It was like walking on water and freedom and levitation. I could feel everything, the birds, the trees, the flowers, the air that we breathe, all of you. I could feel it as if I was one with it. And I was met by archangels, and ascended masters, and my soul group, many spirits that had lived with me in many lifetimes. What was communicated to me first was that I was being re-shown what I had given while I was in physical form. So I reviewed everything from birth until death through everything I affected. So if it was you, if it was any family member, if it was anyone that I had had an experience with in my lifetime, I got to feel through them, their feelings, and see through their eyes what they thought and felt as a result of what I gave. But nothing judged me. There was no judgment whatsoever. What was communicated to me was that we come here to the planet to remember the power that we are, that each and every single one of us is here to remember that God, or what we would call the quantum field or the universe, is having its beingness through us, as us, within us. So this power that we call God, the more that we get out of the way, the more that we allow, the more that it gets to have its expanded expression and experience through us. And when
Mhm.
we allow ourselves to just completely let go, that voice will begin to speak through us. It will become like we are the observers of reality. Almost, I like to describe it like sitting on our own shoulders, where it's
Mhm.
almost like you're sitting on your own shoulder and this voice is talking through you, but you're not doing the talking. This power is speaking through you, this energy, this intelligence, infinite intelligence. And what was communicated to me that every single one of us never die, that we have all lived over and over and over again. This body falls away, but we are pure spirit. And we keep choosing to come back into the planet because, again, we believe that we can remember that we are not separated from this power that is everywhere present.
Mhm.
That's why I say, you're a piece of me. I'm a piece of you. And it's
Mhm.
when we get into competition and think ego and think we're better than, someone else, that we're in separation. We all have a choice point in every moment to be from this elevated emotion, from this truth.
Mhm.
But again, we come here to have the experience, because think about it like this. How could you know who you are if you didn't know who you are not? And it's sad to
Mhm.
say that we have to have these experiences. We choose to have these experiences because before we come into the body, guess what? Everyone that's shown up in your seconds and moments of every single day from the time you're born till right now, you contracted with. That's what was revealed to me, that we contract with everyone who's shown up in our lives, good and bad, to play a role in reminding us and helping us to tap into who we are from that experience to be that true individual that we believed we could come here and be.
Mhm.
And then what was also communicated to me was that I never had to worry, that all the right people would show up at the right moment to help me move forward. And then guess what? I mean, the story is so long, I could go on, but the next thing that was shown to me was the highest me, the me that
Mhm.
had already fulfilled the mission that I came here to be, that I came here to leave that imprint, that signature, that truth to every person that came into my world, that came into my experience, that I leave a legacy on the world will never forget. That I chose to come here and share the depth of what I'm speaking to you right now, to remind
Mhm.
you of the power that is within you, to remind you of the gift that you are, the
Mhm.
magnificence. that you are. Everything that has ever been told to you about what we would call the contrast, the opposite, the illusion, the false truth, you don't have to hold on to. Every single one of us is creating our reality and the experiences that we are having in the now based on what we're giving power to and what we're holding on to in the seconds and moments of each moment of today. And so when what we would call the bad stuff is showing up, it's revealing to us when we are and are not in alignment. One of the things
Uh-huh.
that was said to me when I was given the choice to come back in, so I was given time to rest and to choose, was I going to stay or was I going to come back? What was said to me as I was coming out back into my body, because obviously I chose to come back in, was that I must help the world to understand that they must give of themselves freely without expecting, and love is all there is. Now, when I came back into the body, I told you I had body dysmorphia before the near death. I finally saw myself for who I truly was. I was a 78-pound skeleton. I told you I had lost most of my hair, all on the sides, all of the back was falling out, and I was told to tell. So can you imagine in 1997 talking about this kind of depth? The world
No,
wasn't ready to hear it at this level at that
no.
time. And so I'm telling the world, that all these amazing things are going to happen, that this is what my mission is. This is what we all have access to within ourselves. And I was laughed at, vilified, spit upon, and called crazy. The pro bodybuilding world created a name for me, and that was Scary Sherry. Nobody wanted to hear what I had to say. And I mentioned that I was in religion. So at the time, I was a Baptist, and my family came from the Baptist beliefs. And I'm telling all of this. And at the time, my father said, "You made your bed, you lie in it. You deserve to walk homeless on the streets." I begged for help, but this was too deep. And then my mother was married to a man the same age as me. And he said, "I'm not responsible for your grown daughter and her choices." And so my mother did not know what to do. And so she took me up to the Sequoia National Forest with canned goods and food and camping supplies. But we had to go way out to the outskirts of the forest where you didn't have to pay to camp because we were starting to get to those days when you now had to pay to camp. And so we went
Wow.
way out to the Sequoia National Forest. And let me just preface right now, part of that struggle for me was pride wouldn't let me go get help from the system at the time. And so I ended up living in the Sequoia National Forest with my children, washing my hair with bar soap in a lake because there were no bathrooms or showers or any of that out to the part of the forest that I had to go to. But here's what I really want to point out. Remember when I said I was told that all the right people would show up at the right moment to help me move forward?
Mhm.
That's exactly what happened. I overhear this group of men in the campsite right next to where I was at. And one of the men is talking about his own near death experience to a group of men. And I walked over there and I said to him, I said, "Did I hear you say you had a near death experience?" And he said, "I did." And so that weekend, they shared all their food. We told stories by the fire. They paid for me and the kids to fish with them. And at the end of the weekend, he came to me and he says, "Sherry," he says, you changed my life forever." He says, "You took me to a whole nother level in myself of understanding and connection." He says, "Here's $15. This is all I have." He says, "But I'll never forget you. You took me to the next level in my life." And these are the things that began to happen. I was so activated that I began to hear the spirit speak to me through music, as if I was hearing the words speaking directly to me. And then I ended up from the
That's
Sequoia National Forest into getting a duplex. I happened to have an uncle who knew somebody in real estate. I had no credit anymore. But what ended up happening is in the conversation with this realtor, she tells me the story of her daughter dying and how the son who was married to her daughter, go figure, just happens to work for my other uncle in the town who was an accountant and had an accountant firm since, the 40s. And us just sharing that story in the present moment with each other caused her to speak to the woman who owned the duplex, who ended up letting me rent the duplex despite the fact I had no credit. And these are the things that began to show up as solutions and results and opportunities in my moment, to where I ended up going to Venice Beach to do a photo shoot with Iron Man magazine. And I was given time to walk on Venice Beach. And I see this hippie man on Venice Beach, and he had drawn these huge, intricate etchings, sketches, but very massive and big. And one specific one in the center, I said, I'm drawn to this one. Can you explain it to me? But first I asked his name, and believe it or not, his name was O, capital O. Yeah,
Mm.
go figure, of all things. But, I want to emphasize that through these experiences that I've been sharing with you, these stories, every time I'm having them, it's as if this energy begins to move through my entire body, like walking on water, like a rush of energy coming through my
Uh-huh,
entire
uh-huh.
body, like I'm being
Yeah.
elevated and levitated. And so I begin to listen to the man. He says, I had a vision to draw her. He says it was about this beautiful girl that was created to come into our world. And she was going to leave such a powerful impression on our world that the world would never forget. He says, but she was sucked up by the crazy people of the world for a while. People that were lost in
Mm,
separation
yeah.
and not knowing their truth and giving their power away to other people. And she had lived with the mafia, and she was given a vision towards her purpose or destruction. And she chose God's side. And the right side of this huge sketch was a big, huge demonic head encased in little demons. And it shows that big demonic head spitting her out of its mouth. And she's being spit to the center of the big, huge sketch that he had drawn. And her arms are up in the air like this. And the peace sign with the sunflower is by her face. And God is written over her head
Mm.
in what we would call the Old English font. And at the
Mhm,
top
mhm.
in the center of the big sketch was the yin and the yang, the balance between masculine and feminine energy. And over on the other side was the tree of life with all beautiful fruit on it and the sun and sacred geometry. And then there were, I don't know, probably 20, 25 souls and more lifting their hands up to the heavens in awakening, in remembrance. And I looked at this man and I said to him, you drew me. That was exactly what I was told in this near-death experience. And he never even flinched for a second. He said to me, he said, wow. He says, I am so honored and grateful to meet you. And all of the experiences from those first few weeks and first few months after the near-death experience continued to just lead me in the present moment. And it was such a high level of energy. When we're being in the present moment from this elevated emotion, all it's doing is leading us to the next greater, grander experience.
Mhm.
It's leading
Wow.
us to the next opportunity, the next solution, the next piece of what is part of your mission, your journey, your dreams, your desires, your
Mhm.
intentions. And that's what I've learned to do, is to be my true highest self. I wanted to be that woman. That woman I was shown, the highest me, she cared about others unconditionally. She stood outside the crowd of sheep who said that this wasn't true, that this was crazy thinking. And she continued to believe no matter what anyone said. Kind of reminds me of the story of Job from the Bible. That's my story. I was willing to face the darkest parts of myself, the illusions, the false truths, the fears, the scarcity, the not enough money, the not good enough, the not worthy, all of those emotions that all of us, go through. And I
Hmm.
began to really, truly dedicate myself consistently with a lot of commitment to master the present moment. Every single philosopher, the greatest masters of history said, be in the moment, live in the present. And it's when we're accessing this power within ourselves in the present that we literally are opening the opportunity for this infinite intelligence, again, to express through us, as us, within us. And this has really been the journey. And I can go on and on and on with, amazing experiences that have happened over the last 29 years. But anything you want to ask me and really, and really hone in on some of this stuff?
It sounds like one of the most beautiful experiences,
Thank
if
you.
I'm being really honest. I just got such goosebumps or truth bumps, I should say. But one thing I wanted to sneak back to, Sherry, is how did the near-death experience happen?
Yeah, so I
Or
had
did
an
I miss that?
oh,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
I
what
was
happened?
really into your conversation, so I
I love
stopped
it.
even writing.
Well, thank you. Thank you for going back to that. As I said, I was 78 pounds. So I had starved myself for 6 months and I was living on drugs. I was living on steroids, methamphetamine, and other drugs. All these different drugs that I was utilizing in desperation to be heard, seen, and valued, to reach that level
Mm,
of success that I thought if I could just get there, then I'll finally be loved and accepted. I'll finally have made it. And so I had a massive heart attack. And that's when I was surrendered from the body.
wow.
Hmm.
Oh my goodness. You know, that alone, wow. Do you think well, no, I wanna actually make a comment. I feel when I'm listening to your story, basically, you had to lose yourself to find yourself, and that meant lose everything, to the point of death.
Uh-huh.
And so having said that, did you feel that when after you had that experience, you finally found yourself?
Well, the beauty of it is that yes, the deep desire. I mean, this woman that I was shown, she came to expand the consciousness of the planet, to help activate all of humanity, not only with herself, but with others. That I was told that I would come together with certain people at a certain time in history where it was a great awakening, which is what's been happening,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that the world would hear my message, that this frequency would be spoken through my heart chakra and my throat chakra. To the degree that when I mentioned that everyone and everything and the next solutions and the next results and the next opportunities showed up in the present now moments of today, the greatest leaders of our time have shown up in my life over the last 29 years. Michael
Wow.
Beckwith from the movie The Secret was my very first mentor in 1997. I didn't mention to you that when I was telling you the stories, the mystical stories, so I went from the duplex, eventually from that experience in Venice Beach. I ended up meeting another man on the beach who invited me to live in his commune, of all places. It was for spiritual people who had awakened. And during that time, I had a postcard arrive. And on the postcard, it said my name. And it was basically talking about universal principles, a lot of the things that were communicated to me in the near death experience. So at the time, I had lost everything. I had a bicycle, and my little boy was 2 years old at the time. So I put my little boy on the back of the bike, and I rode my bike for 10 miles to Michael Beckwith's First Church Agape back in the day before he ever became very, well known, many years, probably like 9 years before he became very well known through the movie The Secret. But at that very first experience at his church, it was as if God was speaking to me directly through him. I mean,
Mhm.
was saying every single thing that I needed to hear in that moment, as if it was just me that he was speaking to. At the end of the service, he was at the back of the room, and I walked up to him and he gave me a big hug and he asked me how I had heard about him. And I said, "Well, I received your postcard." And he looks at me and he's like, "What do you mean, my postcard?" And I said, "Yeah, I received your postcard and it said everything on it. I just had a near death experience and it said what I needed to hear." And he hugs me. He takes me in his arms and he hugs me and he whispers in my ear. He says, "Sherry, the God within you revealed to you exactly what you needed to see and read to bring you here." He says, "That is the mystical, when the unseen becomes seen, and it happens through you, within you." And these are the experiences that began to happen, that have happened. I mean, I've worked with Les Brown and trained with, oh my gosh, Bob Proctor, and I have worked with pretty much everybody in The Secret, interviewed them over the years. Dr. John D. Martini, and all of these experiences until now have been preparing me for this moment to be the messenger of truth.
I'm so happy for you. I just got this overwhelming feeling that I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've done a lot of work, and I know that wasn't easy,
No.
right? And then having children.
hmm
Isn't that what happens though? Like,
What I've discovered over the years, to be fully frank and fully honest, is the more that I got out of the way of myself in the present
uh,
moment, the more would show up faster and quicker. See, what most of us are unconscious of is that we are so programmed within ourselves to want to look back at the past, to look back at what happened, how people have hurt us, how we've been wounded, how we've been through all this bad stuff. And we don't realize that the present moment is all that there is. What's happening is remember I said to you earlier, the only thing that matters is what you're giving out right now. So what you
yeah,
give, you receive. What you put out, you pull back. So when we look back, we don't realize in the present moment we are feeling from that old stuff. And so if frequency first is all that there is, elevated emotion, and we're giving out that old emotion right now in this second and the next moment, we are putting out a elevated emotion that's causing everything out there in the universe that vibrates at that same match frequency to be pulled back in our now. And we keep asking the question, why me? When I'm trying, when I'm working harder, when I'm doing what I think I should be doing, we have unconscious emotions and feelings connected to old stuff that is under the surface that most times we're unconscious of, and we keep pulling that back into the now, and it's those experiences that are showing us what is still running very strongly in our operating system. And so in that second that we become the observer of what's showing up, instead of reacting and responding from that old emotion, we begin to shift all that old stuff. Because I say, let's make it simple. I say, if we are individualized creators of our own reality, and that we are individualized gods, that let's make it simple. So all we have to do is something as simple as laughter.
Mm.
Laughter causes the frequency to increase. Or let's take a deep breath into our heart and slowly let it out. Ah. And the more that we do that, guess what? You increase coherence in your heart, the heart frequency. Do you know that the heart vibrates at a frequency that is 5,000 times or 40,000 neurites more powerful than our brain or our gut brain?
No. Wow.
It's that more powerful. So when we elevate this heart coherency, what happens is, guess what? We're putting out this strong frequency, this strong, elevated, what we call resilient frequency out into the universe. And now we're not even having to work hard or hustle or make things happen or do anymore. We are merely pulling back to us
Mm.
peace and calm, ease and grace, good and greater good.
Wow, Sherry. You've calmed me completely. I literally am just sitting here like wanting to close my eyes and listen to you talk. But I guess it's my podcast, isn't it? I can't do
That's
that.
right.
Um, can we step back for a moment? I just
Absolutely.
wanted to ask about your surroundings from that near death experience, if you, or even what you've seen. The audience is often wondering what is seen. So, do you have anything to say about your surroundings once you left your body?
Everything all at once was complete love. It
Okay.
was it was the surroundings were beautiful and filled with enormous light. I was surrounded, as I said, by archangels, ascended masters, Jesus, my soul group, many spirits who had lived with me. And I said we literally are pure light, that this body just leaves, that we are forever. And we never die. As deep as that may sound, our spirits
Mhm.
never die. And so, again, I'm surrounded by many spirits who had lived with me in many lifetimes, my grandmother, my grandfather. So, if we think about, and I didn't even go into a little bit deeper about my surroundings, what it was also communicated to me in this elevated love, because they were all elevating me in profound love. And what was also communicated to me is that we've been it all. We've been male, female, mother, father, grandmother, grandson. We have been it all. When I said, how could you know who you truly are if you had not known who you are not? We keep coming back to the planet to experience different experiences again from the contrast from these other parts of ourselves. And so, as we are evolving into greater, grander expressions of ourselves, we have different deep states of consciousness that most of us don't remember. But that's what was communicated to me in this experience, that we've been it all. We have so much available to us if we would just let go of fear and open
Mhm.
ourselves up to a greater understanding.
Absolutely agree with that. Now, Sherry, did you have one or did you have two NDEs?
Yes, I had a second NDE.
I would love to know about that, please.
Sure. I mentioned Michael Beckwith was my mentor and lots of other mentors that had shown up in my life from 1997 when I had the near death experience until 2004 when I gave birth to twins right before 40.
Oh, wow.
Now, I owned a health club at the time, so my doctor said I was the fittest patient he had ever had, and he had encouraged me to, do whatever I was doing already during the pregnancy.
Mm,
Now, obviously, because of my age, I did have to have the extra tests, the amniocentesis, those
yeah.
sorts of things, regular monthly appointments. And what ended up happening was, fast forward to about 2 weeks before delivery, I swelled up like a tomato. If you would have stuck a pin in me, I would have exploded. Only 2 weeks before. And they weren't
Mm,
sure what was causing it, but of course, they got me in weekly. We're doing the fetal monitoring on both babies, and everything seemed to be okay. Just I was swollen like a tomato. They did determine that I was going to have a C-section because one of the babies ended up having what they call a side insertion. So basically, her umbilical cord grew to my side instead of the top of my uterus, and so I had a C-section. Both babies were born just fine. That day, not long after, when I would nurse the baby or babies, one of the babies was projectiling across the room. So she would nurse and automatically, as if she was throwing up across the room. They thought that it had been attributed to maybe there was still amniotic fluid in her nose or in her lungs. So they kept, sucking her out with one of those
mhm.
bulbous things during that time. But that evening, later on, I had been nursing her and it was happening again. And so I called, pushed the button and called my nurse. She came in and I just told her, I said, listen, intuitively, I think there's something wrong. I said, please, can you take her and figure out what's wrong with her? Later on that evening, probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, she comes into the room and she said, I've been watching her. And she said that she had tried to feed her with a bottle. And she said that the baby was doing the same thing. She said she stuck a tube down her throat and it didn't go anywhere. So they called the doctor. The doctor came in, they ran some x-rays. They discovered that the baby was born without a throat. So she had a box right here, but when they were sticking the tube down her throat, it didn't go anywhere. So they told me that the doctor was on her way and that they were medevacing her to a special children's hospital in Sacramento because where I was living at the time was in Yuba City, which is about 45 minutes outside of Sacramento. Now, for myself, I had just had a C-section, so of course they didn't want me to leave, and I said, I'm leaving. I'm leaving. Find me a way, get me out of this hospital. I'm leaving. So they made arrangements for me to be at the Ronald McDonald Charity House in Sacramento, and they medevaced me up there, and they medevaced her up to the Special Children's Hospital. And then they brought me over to the hospital, and the doctor who was the specialist came to me and he says, listen, he says, we've discovered that a box grew to her throat, that her esophagus grew to her lungs. She was born with half vertebrae in her upper thoracics, an extra rib, half vertebrae in her lower lumbar of her spine, and a hole in her left ventricle of her heart, and double hernias. And I said, well, how does this happen? They ran tests on me. They took tests the whole time I was pregnant. And he said, well, what happens is the first 6 to 8 weeks, most times when you don't even know you're pregnant, all gestation stops. They say that they can call it miraculous restart or divine intervention, but it's an anomaly. And so
Okay.
somewhere in development, they don't know when and how, it starts again. And so they think that's what happened. And so he says, we're going to have to do a reconstruction immediately. He says, we may not be able to stretch the esophagus because it had grown to her lungs. So they had to collapse the esophagus from the lungs, but they weren't sure if it was going to be able to be stretched long enough. So he said she may be, having to eat out of a G tube for 2 years while they stretch the esophagus.
Mm,
But ultimately what he said is that she'll probably never eat right because when you do that kind of surgery, they don't have the sweet squeezing mechanism that you and I have. The esophagus squeezes our food into our stomach.
mhm.
So in this situation, what basically I said to him, I said, she's going to be fine. And so I teach this a lot, but through this process of which was originated by Ernest Holmes. He was part of the whole transcendentalist period during the 1800s with, our poets Emerson and Wadsworth and Longfellow and Thoreau back in Boston, Massachusetts. All these people congregated together and they established some of our organizations we call today, like Christian Science,
Hmm.
Unity, um, um, Science of Mind. And in this situation, that's what Michael Beckwith is licensed in as a minister. And so I learned all this, and it's called affirmative prayer. And instead of looking at the appearance of what we would call dis-ease, you go through a 5-step process, which is about reclaiming your perfection, your oneness, your wholeness. And that process is first started with recognition that there's a power that's everywhere present, this source, this God, this infinite intelligence, this universe. And step 2 is what's called unification. We unify with this power that is within us. And step 3 is claim and declare. So we claim that which we already are, whole, perfect, and complete. And everything within us is operating from its oneness, its highest capacity. Every cell, every organ, every vessel, every bone, our body is dancing in the joy of its magnificence, its oneness. And step 4 is gratitude. How grateful are we all to know that this power, we can access it in any second, in any moment within us. Step 5 is release. You release it to the action of God, to the action of the law, to the action of the universe, to the action of the quantum field, whatever that is for you. And you get out of the way. It is already done. It is already so. It already is. And it's just like the planting of the seed. When we are trying to dig up the seed that we planted, what happens? We're in the way. The seed is to be watered by us. The seed is to have the weeds that can show up in our consciousness and our doubts and our fears and a second of the moment of today be taken out. And we continue to affirm that which we are, whole, perfect, and complete, and one with this power. And that is exactly what happened. So not only did that happen with her, but 1 week later, I went into total cardiac arrest. They say that 1 in 20,000 women who deliver a baby or babies over the age of 35 have the chance of developing a rare heart disease. And it's called cardiomyopathy or total congestive heart failure. So I, over a period of a week, began to drown on my own fluids, my internal fluids, and my heart couldn't pump the fluids off my lungs. So my heart stretched out about the size of a cantaloupe. And so I went into cardiac arrest. I would open my mouth and my mouth was like Pop Rock candies when we were kids, how you'd have the popping
Mm.
and fizzing sound. That was the sound that was coming out of my mouth. So I had another near-death experience, and guess what I was told in this one? So simple, so easy, so matter of fact. Um, I was told, you know who you are. Your mission is too powerful, and you need to go back and do it. And all of a sudden, I watch myself going back into my bed in ICU, and I'm hearing my husband at the time screaming out the door in ICU. And I wasn't sure what he was saying. And then I see him walk in with this little short Asian doctor, and he begins to tell me that I had a massive heart attack. And the doctor says that I have 37% heart function and that I could die and then I will be on my back for 6 months waiting for a heart transplant. And I looked at
Oh.
him and I said, "Nope." I said, "I know what I'm here to do." I right out told him, "I've already had one near-death experience. Now I just had another near-death experience." I told him, I said, "I know what I'm meant to do. I'm going to show you how I'm going to heal to 100%." And so over the next 3 years, I bead from the beingness I would be from as if that were already true. So I never looked at the diagnosis. I never owned the diagnosis. The doctor kept telling me this is airy fairy thinking and we needed to look at this realistically. You know me, you will know that I am over the top, fun, playful, extra. And
Mhm.
I always like to say, I'm going to be 61 years old in June.
Ooh.
Do you think that I'm not going to stand outside the crowd of sheep and dare to be myself and share this truth with all of those people who are open and receptive? You better believe I am. And that's what I told the doctor. So whenever I would go to my appointments, I would say, I'm going to show you what I can do. And I would tell him over and over, there's this power within me that's going to demonstrate what's available to all of us, what all of us are capable of. And over a period of 3 years, we became really good friends. Now, one day I walk into my doctor's appointment and here I am, silly, playful Sherry again. And he says, have a seat. And he says, you are the most amazing person I've ever met. He says, when I very first met you, he said, oh my goodness. I was like, what planet is she on? But he says, as I got to know you, he says, and how you educate, how you teach, how you story tell is what he would say. I began to develop stories to tell my patients. And he says, and so,
Mm.
but what's happened is he says, is you have not only healed to 100% from 37% heart function, but your medication is now harming you rather than helping you. And so over the next 2 weeks, he weaned me off of all the medication, and that was in
Wow.
2007. Do you know that they
Wow.
can't show signs of me ever having had any heart attacks now? And I've got proof. I've got all of
Wow.
my medical paperwork and all of that. But the point of it all is that I don't have anything you don't have yourself. Every single one of us is this powerful. And all we have to do is tap in here, let go of the fear, let go of the worry, let go of the scarcity thinking, and tap into a higher frequency.
Oh, Sherry, you're incredible. That doctor was not wrong. I can tell you that right now. Not wrong at all. And I'm pretty sure that child type behavior that you have there has
Hmm.
kept you looking fantastic. Yes, and inside and healthy as well. Because when we keep that childlike essence about us, we don't get too serious. We don't make so much
Yeah,
issues out of everything. We keep light, we have fun with life, and we stay young looking, just like you, right?
thank you. Right.
You look incredible.
Yep. Yep.
You
Well, you know
really
what?
do.
I have to tell you
You
the story.
really
So I,
do.
I toasted the new year with Oprah in 2011. And she said something that literally changed the game for me because, we're human. We all want to help other people. And
Mm.
I was a savior mentality. So a lot of times what would happen is I would give away all my power to save. And so what happened with her is she said something that changed the game for me. She said she could have been like everybody else, but she kept asking to be used as a vessel, as a vehicle, to be spoken through. And she said this voice said once, you're not here to save people. You're here to be a messenger of light, to be a seed planter, and to give the message and move forward. It's not your job to save that person. When they're ready, when they're seeking, when they're open at their own moment in themselves, they will remember your words. And that shifted everything for me because all I wanted to do was help. And it would affect me so deeply when people didn't get it. But now I know it's not my job only to be a seed planter.
Sherry, if I was to ask you, because you've returned from the brink 2 times, not once, twice, and then completely healed. If you were sitting beside a dying loved one, what advice would you give to them?
I would merely just say, just know that Love beyond human understanding is what you're being invited into. Let
Mm.
go. It's okay. We will see each other again. That's what most people don't realize is you and I
Yeah.
and all of us are on this podcast right now. But do you
Mhm.
know that the other side is just like dipping your toe in the lake or the water? That veil is so thin. So when you're with somebody who's about to die, you just share with them the expectation of love, the
Mhm.
knowingness that they will be held in the arms of the magnificence of this oneness, this freedom beyond human understanding, and that all of their family members and everybody who has ever been in their experience will be inviting them, their soul group.
Ugh, you brought tears to my eyes. Sherry, I know you've woven all these experiences into your work and into your book, The Afterlife Round Tripper. Can you share what you're currently offering and services or where people can contact you? And also a little bit about the book as well, please.
Yeah, so the book is really focused on, again, all of the solutions, tools that help us to be in the present. Because again, the now is all that there is. And it's what you are connecting with in the now emotionally and what you're putting your attention on that is causing the reality that you're experiencing. So just laugh, just play, just dance. And then, so just to go back for a second, my business partner, who is Dr. Joe Dispenza's neuroscientist in all of his books, he just passed away in July. And the two of us had developed Thought University. And it was the works of sharing what the things I've been talking about through this entire interview. It's merging science and spirituality. It's helping people to understand
Mm.
through quantum physics, through manifestation, or what we would call metaphysics, and through neuroscience. What's being released through the chemical parts of our body that's causing what we would call fight, flight, and freeze, and
Mhm.
the experiences that don't serve us. And it's really helping us to understand how in our life, what we put our attention, our emotion, and our belief on shapes perception and behavior. And that is the doorway into manifestation, intention, and what we call identity creation.
Wow. And can I find that information on your website?
Yes, you can find it at thoughtuniversity.net.
Perfect. I'm going there right after this. I am so enthralled by you. I really am. And I don't know, I just really think you're a lovely speaker. You're very
Oh,
good at what you do, and I'm really honored to have you here. I'm saying that before the end, but I'm feeling that, so I wanna make sure that I tell you that. So everyone that comes back, usually from their near-death experience, always returns with a truth, something that's distilled, essential, and enduring. That's what I've found. So, having said that, what would the return to be without having a signature question related to that? So, my last question to you is what truth did you return with that you believe humanity needs to hear?
that we are all ready, whole,
Oh,
perfect, and complete. That every single thing we have ever wanted, intended, and desired is already inside of us, and that we must give of ourselves freely without expecting. And love is all there is, even if it's just a word of encouragement and inspiration.
absolutely beautiful. Now, Sherry, Thank you so much from my heart to yours. I am very grateful that you joined us here today. I am very thankful for your strength and your vulnerability and your story. It reminds me that love is not just something we feel, but is actually something we come from and we return to and are shaped by. So I am so very grateful that you have brought your light to the return today.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And to the audience, if there's one thing to carry with you from this conversation, let it be this: love is not separate from who you are. It's the force that propels, heals, and evolves. And until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep returning to the truth within you.